Think you're tough? Prove it, the waitress laughed at the Mafia boss. Until she dropped him cold. This story began on a quiet night at a small place called Blue Harbor Diner, a simple restaurant near the old docks by the sea. The diner was not famous, not fancy, and not special to outsiders, but to the local people, it felt like home. The walls were painted light blue, the lights were warm and soft, and the smell of coffee and fried food always filled the air. Old fishermen, tired drivers, factory workers, and lonely travelers came here every night. It was a place where people shared stories, laughter, and sometimes silence. Nothing dangerous ever happened there. It was a place of peace. Lily worked there as a waitress. She was young, kind, and hard-working. Life had not been easy for her, but she never complained. She had lost her father years ago, and her mother worked in another city, so Lily learned early how to be strong and independent. She worked long hours, saved her money, and dreamed of a better future. People liked her because she was respectful, calm, and honest. She never treated customers differently, whether they were rich, poor, kind, or rude. In the kitchen worked her best friend Grace, who was loud, funny, and full of life. Grace believed in dreams and hope, even when life felt heavy. At the counter worked Ava, the owner's daughter. Ava had grown up in the diner, and she treated it like her second home. Together, the three girls felt safe in this place. The diner was their world. That night started like any other. Soft music played from the old radio. A few customers sat quietly. Some talked in low voices. Some stared at their phones. The rain outside made the windows foggy, and the streetlights reflected on the wet road. Lily moved between tables with a gentle smile, carrying coffee cups and plates of food. Everything felt normal. Peaceful. Predictable. Then the door opened. The bell above the door rang, but the sound felt different this time. Heavy. Cold. The air in the diner changed instantly. Conversation stopped. People looked up. Silence spread like fear in a room. A man walked in with two large bodyguards. He wore a dark coat, expensive shoes, and a serious expression. His eyes were cold and sharp. Everyone knew who he was. No one said his name. In the city, people simply called him the Mafia boss. His reputation was built on fear, power, and control. People whispered stories about him, about his violence, his influence, and the way people disappeared after crossing him. Some customers stood up and quietly left without finishing their food. Others lowered their heads. The room felt heavy. Tense. Unsafe. He chose a table near the center, like he owned the place. His bodyguards stood behind him like shadows. He didn't look around with curiosity. He looked around with control. In the kitchen, Grace felt her stomach tighten. At the counter, Ava froze. Lily noticed the change in the room, but she didn't panic. She took a deep breath, held her tray, and walked toward his table. Not because she was brave, but because it was her job. And because fear had never ruled her life. She stood beside the table and spoke politely, "Good evening. What would you like to order?" Her voice was calm. Respectful. Professional. The Mafia boss looked up at her slowly. His eyes studied her face, her posture, her calm expression. He smiled slightly, but it was not a kind smile. It was a proud, mocking smile. He ordered his food in a cold voice and then leaned back in his chair. Instead of letting her leave, he started talking. Loud enough for people to hear. He talked about power. About fear. About how the city belonged to people like him. About how people only respected strength and violence. Lily stood there, holding her tray, listening quietly. She didn't argue. She didn't show fear. She didn't change her expression. That calmness annoyed him. He looked at her and said, in a mocking tone, people like you should be afraid. Everyone is afraid of me. Lily smiled softly. Not a rude smile. Not a proud smile. A calm, human smile. She replied gently, I treat everyone with respect. That simple sentence felt like a challenge to him. The Mafia boss laughed loudly. He leaned forward and looked straight into her eyes. His voice became sharper, darker. Respect comes from fear, he said. Lily didn't raise her voice. She didn't step back. She simply said, no. Respect comes from character. The diner went silent. Grace stopped moving in the kitchen. Ava's hands started shaking. Customers looked at each other in fear. No one spoke to him like this. No one ever did. The Mafia boss stared at Lily, shocked that a simple waitress would speak to him with such calm confidence. His pride was touched. His ego was challenged. And in that moment, without anyone knowing it, the night at Blue Harbor Diner stopped being normal. That peaceful place, that simple diner, that quiet night, was about to become a story the whole city would remember forever. The silence inside Blue Harbor Diner felt heavy, thick, and uncomfortable, as if the air itself had stopped moving. Everyone could feel something dangerous growing in the room, something unseen but powerful. The Mafia boss remained seated, staring at Lily with a look that mixed anger, surprise, and wounded pride. No one had ever spoken to him the way she had, not with insults, not with fear, but with calm confidence. That was what hurt him the most. Fear he understood. Anger he expected. But calm courage. That was new to him, and it made him feel small in front of everyone. Lily stood there quietly, holding her tray, her heart beating fast inside her chest. She was scared, but she refused to show it. Her hands were steady, her back straight, and her eyes clear. Inside, she felt the danger, the risk, and the reality of the situation. But something stronger than fear was holding her in place. It was dignity. It was self-respect. It was the belief that no human being had the right to treat another like an object. The Mafia boss slowly stood up from his chair. The sound of the chair scraping the floor felt loud in the silence. His bodyguards shifted slightly, ready for anything. His face was hard, his jaw tight, and his eyes dark with anger. He walked closer to Lily, step by step, using his height and presence to try to control the moment. The distance between them felt dangerous. Everyone in the diner held their breath. Grace was frozen in the kitchen, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Ava gripped the edge of the counter, her eyes wide with fear. Customers didn't move. No one dared to speak. No one dared to interrupt. The power in the room belonged to one man, or at least, it always had before. The Mafia boss leaned closer to Lily and said in a low voice, "Do you know who I am?" His voice was cold and threatening. "People disappear for less than what you just said." Lily looked up at him calmly. Her voice didn't shake. "I know who you are," she said simply. "But I also know who I am." That sentence hit harder than any insult. It was not aggressive. It was not loud. But it was strong. It showed self-belief, and that made him angrier than disrespect ever could. He laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. It was sharp, full of ego and pride. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. "You think you're brave," he said loudly. "You think you're tough." Then he pointed at her and said the words that would later become famous across the city, "Think you're tough? Prove it." The room felt like it might explode. Grace whispered Lily's name under her breath, tears filling her eyes. Ava silently prayed that Lily would step back, that she would apologize, that this nightmare would end without violence. But Lily didn't move. She didn't shout. She didn't insult him. She didn't challenge him with anger. She did something no one expected. She laughed. Not a mocking laugh. Not a rude laugh. A soft, human laugh. The kind of laugh that comes from disbelief, not disrespect. The Mafia boss froze, shocked by the sound. No one had ever laughed in his face before. Lily looked at him and said calmly, "Being tough isn't about hurting people. It's about knowing who you are and not letting fear control you." Her words were simple, but they carried deep meaning. They were not meant to challenge his power. They were meant to protect her dignity. The Mafia boss's face turned red. His pride was wounded in front of everyone. His power, built on fear and silence, was being questioned by a simple waitress in a small diner. That humiliation burned inside him. He stepped closer, invading her personal space, trying to use fear to regain control. "I can destroy your life," he said. "Your job. Your family. Your future." Lily felt fear rise inside her, but she didn't let it rule her actions. She took a slow breath and said, "Maybe you can. But that doesn't make you strong. It just makes you dangerous." Those words cut deep. The Mafia boss raised his hand, not to hit her, but to scare her, to show power, to dominate the moment. The bodyguards moved slightly forward. The tension in the diner became unbearable. Some customers closed their eyes. Others turned their heads away, expecting violence. But Lily didn't step back. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply stood her ground. And in that moment, something changed. The fear that had always controlled the room no longer belonged to one man alone. For the first time, the power shifted. Not through violence, not through force, but through courage and calm resistance. The Mafia boss hesitated. Just for a second. But that second was enough. Because in that silence, everyone in the diner saw something they had never seen before, the Mafia boss uncertain, confused, and challenged. Not by another criminal, not by a rival, not by a weapon, but by a young waitress who refused to bow her head. The night had crossed a point of no return. And the next moment would change all of their lives forever. Time seemed to slow down inside Blue Harbor Diner. The silence was so deep that even the sound of breathing felt loud. The Mafia boss stood in front of Lily, his raised hand frozen in the air, his face filled with confusion, anger, and wounded pride. For the first time in his life, he did not know what to do. His power had always come from fear, from silence, from people lowering their heads and stepping back. But Lily had done the opposite. She had not moved. She had not begged. She had not shown fear. She had simply stood there, calm and human, refusing to be controlled. That quiet resistance broke something inside him. Lily's heart was racing, but her mind was clear. She remembered her father's words from years ago, lessons he had taught her not about violence, but about awareness, balance, and self-protection. He had always said, if danger comes, don't panic. Control your fear, and your body will follow your mind. She never imagined she would face a moment like this, but now those words felt alive inside her. The Mafia boss suddenly moved forward, trying to grab her arm. It was not a planned attack, it was an emotional reaction, driven by anger and ego. The moment his hand touched her wrist, Lily reacted instinctively. Her body moved before her thoughts. She turned her wrist, stepped to the side, and shifted her weight, using a simple self-defense movement that redirected his force instead of fighting it directly. It was not aggressive. It was controlled. It was clean. It was precise. The Mafia boss lost his balance. In that split second, Lily placed her hand against his shoulder and chest and pushed forward with firm, steady strength, using his own movement against him. He stumbled backward, his feet slipping on the smooth floor. And he fell heavily onto the ground. The sound of his body hitting the floor echoed through the diner like thunder. The room froze. No one moved. No one spoke. No one breathed. The Mafia boss lay on the floor, stunned, shocked, and humiliated. His bodyguards rushed forward, panic and anger in their eyes, but they stopped when he raised his hand slowly, signaling them to stay back. His face was filled with disbelief. Not pain. Not injury. But humiliation. Lily stood there, shaking slightly now that the moment had passed. Her breathing was fast, her hands trembling, but her eyes were calm. She had not meant to hurt him. She had not attacked him out of anger. She had only protected herself. Grace ran out from the kitchen, tears streaming down her face, fear and relief mixed together. Ava covered her mouth with her hands, unable to believe what she had just seen. The customers stood frozen in shock. Some looked at Lily with fear. Others looked at her with respect. Some looked at her with admiration. But everyone knew one thing: something impossible had just happened. The Mafia boss slowly sat up. His pride was broken in front of strangers, workers, and ordinary people. His image of power had cracked. His legend of fear had been challenged. His eyes met Lily's. She didn't smile. She didn't insult him. She didn't say anything cruel. She simply said, in a quiet voice, "I don't want trouble. I just want respect." Those words carried more power than violence ever could. The Mafia boss stayed silent for a long moment. The diner was so quiet that the ticking of the old wall clock could be heard. His bodyguards waited, tense and ready. Everyone expected him to explode in rage, to order violence, to destroy everything in front of him. But something unexpected happened. He laughed. Not a loud laugh. Not a cruel laugh. Not a mocking laugh. A tired laugh. A broken laugh. A human laugh. He slowly stood up, brushing dust from his coat. He looked around the diner, at the scared faces, the frozen customers, the shaking staff, and finally back at Lily. His eyes were no longer full of rage. They were full of something else, reflection. "You're different," he said quietly. "Most people fight with fear. You fight with control." He paused, then added, "And that's more dangerous than violence." The room remained silent. He reached into his pocket, pulled out money, and placed it on the table. Then he looked at Lily one last time and said, "Tonight, you didn't defeat me. You reminded me of something I forgot." No one understood what he meant, but everyone felt the weight of his words. He turned to his bodyguards and said, "We're leaving." They followed him without a word. The door closed behind them. The silence broke into noise, whispers, cries, and shocked voices. People started talking at once. Some were crying. Some were laughing in disbelief. Some were praying. Some were staring at Lily like she was unreal. Grace hugged Lily tightly, shaking with emotion. Ava cried openly, repeating, "I thought we were going to die." Lily felt her legs weaken, and she sat down in a chair, overwhelmed. The fear, the shock, the adrenaline, the reality, all crashed into her at once. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't fearless. She was just human. A human who chose not to be broken. That night, the legend of fear fell. Not with guns. Not with blood. Not with violence. But with courage, control, and the quiet strength of a young waitress who refused to bow her head. And from that moment on, the story of the Mafia boss and the waitress at Blue Harbor Diner would become a story the city would never forget. After the door of Blue Harbor Diner closed behind the Mafia boss and his bodyguards, the silence that followed felt different from the silence before. This was not the silence of fear, but the silence of shock, relief, and disbelief. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm has passed. When the air still feels heavy, but the danger is gone. People stood frozen for a few seconds, trying to understand what had just happened. Some customers slowly sat back down. Others looked around the room as if waking from a bad dream. The ordinary diner, with its simple tables, warm lights, and quiet radio music, now felt like a place where history had been made. Lily sat in a chair near the counter, her body shaking, her hands cold, her heart still racing. The courage that had held her strong during the moment now slowly faded, and reality rushed in. Fear, relief, shock, and exhaustion all mixed together inside her. Grace was beside her, holding her tightly, crying openly. Ava stood in front of them, her face pale, her eyes full of tears, her voice trembling as she kept saying, "I can't believe you're alive. I can't believe this is real." Customers slowly began to talk. Some whispered prayers. Some spoke in low, shocked voices. Some looked at Lily with respect, like she was someone different now, someone stronger than before. But Lily didn't feel strong. She felt human. Fragile. Overwhelmed. She didn't see herself as brave or powerful. She only saw herself as a girl who had stood up because she had no other choice. The owner of the diner arrived after hearing the noise and confusion. When he understood what had happened, he sat down heavily in a chair, unable to speak for a long moment. Fear filled his face, not for what had happened, but for what might come next. In a city ruled by fear and power, actions had consequences. Standing up to someone like the Mafia boss was not just a moment, it was a risk that could follow a person forever. That fear spread quietly through the room. Grace felt it. Ava felt it. Lily felt it too. "What if he comes back?" Ava whispered. "What if he sends people?" Grace asked softly. Lily didn't answer immediately. She looked around the diner, the place that had always felt safe, warm, and simple. For the first time, she felt uncertainty about the future. Courage didn't remove fear. It only gave you the strength to face it. Hours passed slowly. The diner eventually closed for the night. The customers left, still talking about what they had seen. The story was already spreading. By morning, the whole city would know. Lily, Grace, and Ava stayed behind, sitting together in silence. The radio played softly in the background. The smell of coffee still hung in the air. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Grace finally spoke. "Your life changed tonight." Lily nodded slowly. "I know. But I don't think you did anything wrong," Grace added. "You protected yourself. You protected us." Ava looked at Lily and said, "You showed everyone something important. That fear doesn't have to control everything." Those words stayed in Lily's mind. The next morning, the city felt different. People looked at Lily differently. Taxi drivers, shopkeepers, and customers who recognized her whispered her name. Some smiled at her. Some nodded with respect. Some looked at her with curiosity. The story of the waitress and the Mafia boss spread fast. It moved through streets, markets, homes, and workplaces. It became a symbol story, one of courage, resistance, and quiet strength. But not all attention felt good. Some people warned her to be careful. Some said she should leave the city. Some said she had made a powerful enemy. Fear returned in different forms: quiet fear, deep fear, future fear. Lily felt torn inside. Part of her felt proud of standing up for herself. Another part of her felt scared of what might come next. Strength didn't remove consequences. Days passed. Nothing happened. No threats. No warnings. No attacks. No messages. No shadows following her. The Mafia boss never returned. People began to relax. Slowly, fear faded into curiosity, then into admiration. Lily became known as more than just a waitress. She became a symbol of dignity. A symbol of courage. A symbol of quiet resistance. But inside, Lily stayed the same person. She still worked long shifts. She still saved her money. She still helped Grace in the kitchen and talked with Ava at the counter. She didn't seek attention. She didn't tell her story loudly. She didn't chase fame. She just lived her life. One evening, weeks later, Lily sat alone in the empty diner after closing time. The lights were dim. The radio played softly. The world felt quiet again. She thought about that night. About fear. About power. About courage. And she realized something important. Real strength is not about defeating others. Real strength is not about control. Real strength is not about fear. Real strength is about staying human in a world that tries to make you hard. Real strength is about dignity when others use violence. Real strength is about courage without cruelty. The storm had passed. But the lesson remained. And the city would carry that lesson for a long time, whether it wanted to or not. Life slowly returned to its normal rhythm at Blue Harbor Diner, but nothing was truly the same anymore. The tables were the same, the chairs were the same, the old radio still played soft music, and the smell of coffee still filled the air every morning, but the feeling inside the diner had changed. There was a new kind of energy, a quiet confidence that had never existed before. People walked in with lighter faces, softer eyes, and calmer hearts. The place that was once just a simple diner had become a symbol of something deeper, a place where fear had been challenged and dignity had survived. Lily continued working her shifts, just like before. She wore the same uniform, served the same food, and greeted customers with the same gentle smile. But inside her, something had changed forever. She no longer doubted her worth. She no longer saw herself as small or powerless. She had learned that strength does not come from status, money, or power. It comes from self-belief and courage in the face of fear. She didn't feel like a hero, but she felt whole. For the first time in her life, she truly trusted herself. Grace and Ava also changed. Grace became more confident, more open, and less afraid of the world. She started talking about her dreams more seriously, about opening her own cafe one day, about creating a future that didn't depend on fear or limits. Ava began to see the diner not just as a family business, but as a place of community and healing. She started organizing small events, music nights, and community dinners, turning the diner into a place where people felt safe, welcome, and respected. The story of that night continued to live in the city, but it slowly transformed. At first, it was told as a shocking story. Then it became a legend. Later, it became a lesson. Parents told it to their children. Workers told it to each other. People didn't focus on the fall of the Mafia boss anymore, they focused on the courage of a waitress who refused to bow her head. The Mafia boss himself became a shadow in the story. Some people said he left the city. Others said he lost his influence. Some said he changed his life. No one knew the truth. But one thing was clear, his power was no longer untouchable. The fear that surrounded his name had weakened. Not because of violence, but because people had seen that fear could be challenged. Lily never spoke badly about him. She never told the story with anger. When people asked her what happened, she simply said, "I protected myself." That's all. She didn't seek attention. She didn't build her identity on that night. She didn't turn her pain into pride. She stayed humble, quiet, and grounded. One evening, months later, Lily, Grace, and Ava sat together after closing time, drinking coffee and watching the rain fall outside the window. The city lights reflected on the wet road. Just like they had on the night everything changed. The memory felt distant now, but still powerful. Grace smiled and said, "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been if you had stepped back that night?" Lily nodded slowly. "Sometimes," she said. "But I also know I would never forgive myself if I had let fear decide who I am." Ava looked at Lily and said, "You didn't just change your life. You changed how people think." Lily thought for a moment, then replied softly, "I didn't change the world. I just chose not to be silent." Those words carried the truth of everything. Real change doesn't always come with noise. It doesn't always come with power. It doesn't always come with force. Sometimes, real change comes from one quiet moment of courage. One human decision. One act of self-respect. One refusal to live in fear. Blue Harbor Diner became more than just a place to eat. It became a symbol of safety, courage, and dignity. People came not just for food, but for peace. For warmth. For a feeling of belonging. The walls held stories now. The tables held memories. The air held meaning. Lily never left the city. She never ran away. She never hid. She lived openly, honestly, and calmly. Fear no longer controlled her choices. She built her future slowly, step by step, with patience and purpose. She studied part-time, saved money, and dreamed bigger than she ever had before. The girl who once felt small now felt strong, not because she had power, but because she had peace. And the city changed too. Not overnight. Not perfectly. Not completely. But slowly. People spoke more openly. They stood up more often. They feared less. They believed more. All because of one night. One diner. One waitress. One moment of courage. The story that began with fear ended with hope. Not a loud hope. Not a dramatic hope. Not a perfect hope. But a real one. A human one. A quiet one. And that is how the story of Think You're Tough. Prove It, the waitress laughed at the Mafia boss. Until she dropped him cold truly ended, not with violence, not with revenge, not with destruction, but with change, courage, dignity, and the simple truth that even in the darkest places, light can rise from the most unexpected hearts.